All right, back to it. So as I was saying, this is going slow. The first part of chapter 8, which has to do, this whole chapter has to do with revolutions that occurred after the reign of Napoleon and the whole Napoleonic Wars chapter that we finished last semester. So some of it's going to play on that, and some of it's going to play on the political structure we kind of already discussed. But I also realized that there might be a little bit, long time ago, all 2 weeks ago. So we might have to review some of this. How weird is that? We took this test only 2 weeks ago. 2.5. Memory. So basically, this entire section is about people. People that are important for a variety of reasons. By the way, did you notice the notes are different again? That's because I trust you. I trust that you can do the big blocks of text now. So I'm not doing that crap anymore because it's tedious for me to do as well. You're going to see who, what, and when. This is my favorite way of showing information. Yeah, well, you guys should probably already have this, but you don't have these dudes? One dude, not the other dude? Okay, we're going to roll both dudes. No worries. Worry-free. So the first dude is famous for helping to instigate and lead a rebellion in Haiti, which, as you know, was part of a greater island, Hispaniola. Now let's talk slavery for just a second. Slavery resulted in a lot more blacks than whites, as you could imagine in these places. I'm talking like 1,000 to 1 in some of these places. So slaves have always held the numbers should they decide to rebel. So this begs the question, why don't they? Let's just stop a bunch of slaves from having a revolt and killing all the slave masters. I mean, life was terrible for slaves, we know this. So why not put it into it? It's an interesting question of psychology, I feel. Can you think of a reason why they might not have? Or maybe guess? Yeah.
The slave owners had more power, more weapons.
Not even most of them, you're right. For all that, but we get to, not really tell you most of them, because weapons we're still talking black powder weapons. So, it's not even that most of them died at some way. To put that in other words, a great example. If a school shooter came to the store right now and started shooting up the building with the guns, right? And we all got out of our seats and charged him, just beat him down. Just try to just pummel him with fists until he didn't move anymore. Could we do it? Absolutely. Dude has a machine gun on him. And that's just it. We all will not live in that situation. That is true. That situation, not all of us are going to live. But maybe most of us would. So logically, mathematically, we should do that every single time. But we don't. Because who wants to be the person to run the charge first? That's the person most likely to die. The person who leads the charge. Who's willing to do that? You know what I mean? That's not the easy thing to do. That's what Toussaint does. Toussaint's the leader. He organizes people. He convinces people that not only are they fully capable of doing this, but emboldens them to completely turn over the world. Now, something else we don't often think about is that a lot of these slaves have been slaves their entire lives. We're not talking people who were captured. That does happen. But just as often, they're slaves who were born into the life. So it's completely changing everything they know about life. Consider this. If we were to rebel against the United States of America, overthrow the government, and form a new government, how scary that would be. Could we do it? Absolutely. There's nothing stopping us. But we don't. Not that I'm saying we should either. I'm just saying it's possible. You know? But think about all the difficulties of life. Even situations that are really, 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 really bad. It's scary to overthrow governments. It's scary to do this. So it's not that the people, these slaves are weak. Far from it. They endure lives that are way harder than ours. It's not that they're not brave. It's that hard to do. Not only this, but they're going to be overthrowing a colonial power that has the de facto most powerful army in the world, France. But he does it. Because of his actions, Haiti becomes an independent state. Now, despite this, when Haiti and France had an armistice, the French troops captured Toussaint and spirit him away to a prison in France where he basically dies. He never actually gets to see the fruits of his efforts, but he is remembered as a great hero to this day in Haiti. So, neat guy. What's a great name? Gotta look at Toussaint. Simon Bolivar, we've talked about him before. He was known as the Liberator. He is kind of a dynamic duo of revolutionary leaders in South America, paired with Jose de San Martin, or however you say that. He was a firebrand sort of speech giver. He was the inspirer, if you will. He was not a military guy, but he could organize, and he did organize very, very well. Mark was sort of the military guy out of this thing. He was a military trained. Bolivar was from a college. You know, they really didn't see eye to eye. They didn't have that much in common except for their mission. And what they did was kind of unique. Instead of fighting amongst themselves, they banded together and worked together to liberate not only their own countries, but the majority of Central and South America. Bolivar really gets a lot more credit than St. Martin, I think, because he was like the figurehead of the duo. St. Martin was willing to let him be in charge because he was better at inspiring people. This is one of the things you have to realize about leaders. They have to inspire. They can't do everything themselves. That's not leadership to begin with. But a good leader will make you want to do your job better. They will make you want to sacrifice to be strong in difficult situations. They can make you better than what you are normally. That's what a leader does. This is a painting done of Toussaint Louverture. The thing is, if you look at paintings of Toussaint, he's often dressed like this. What's he dressed as? Yeah, like a military, in its military uniform, yeah? He got all the goods and landed in the plane. He never looked like that. He wasn't a military general, he was a slave. He wasn't trained in the military, he just figured it out. Yet he's able to defeat armies like Napoleon. So that's kind of a big deal, you know? So this is kind of like elevating him to a level on par with those who he faced, you know? I think it's sort of fascinating in ways. It's revisionist in a way, but I don't know. Again, even though he didn't look like this, he inspired like this. If that makes any sense at all. Anyhow, great leader. So back to St. Martin. He was, as I said, the military branch of these two. And together, they're able to liberate basically all of South America, kicking the Spanish completely out. However, the problem that arises from this is that their plan was to have a unified South America at the end of it. That did not happen. Instead, the various countries of South America, the various groups in South America started squabbling, and they fragmented into various other countries that to this day have difficulty working together. Nationalism is a big part of that, which we're going to get to here in a minute. So suffice it to say, they are going to be very important for South America. Father Hidalgo is the beginner, is the, how do I word this? let me do it this way. He's the one who begins the revolution in Mexico, as it says there at the bottom. He was a priest, as you know, he was a Creole. Which, by the way, do you guys remember what the Creole is?
Aren't they like the second highest in the social class?
There you go. The Peninsulare, Creole, Mestizo, Mulatto. What are we talking about here? What's the difference between all these different people? What do they have in common? They are all what? Yeah, but something more specific. They are all races. Or rather, mixing of races. Peninsulares are pure Spanish from Spain. Creoles are ethnically, genetically Spanish, but they're not born in Spain. They're born in the New World. Creoles and mulattoes are mixed breeds. Specifically, what happened is a lot of the people who were Europeans coming into the New World were young men. When they settled in this area, their only hopes of finding a spouse was in natives or Africans. And so that's what they did. They married native Africans, had mixed children, mestizos being a European and a native parent, and mulattoes being an African and a European parent. So what this did is it created a social hierarchy based upon your race. This was seen as very unfair for obvious reasons, and is one of the big problems with the social stigmatization and the social issues in Mexico. So Father Hidalgo writes a very passionate speech denouncing the use of this hierarchy, and specifically horrible treatment of the mestizos and mulattoes, and calls for a rising up of a revolution. However, he is caught, captured, whatever, and killed. And so the leadership of the revolution passes to the second man, Jose Morelos, who is going to successfully lead the revolution for a short period of time, about 4 years, until he is killed in a battle. I believe he's killed. I'm not 100% about. He was defeated regardless by Augustine de Iturbide, who was a up-and-coming commanding general in the army of Spain, who had his sights set on a viceroy ship. He wanted to be in charge. He was ambitious. He was a good commander. However, as we're going to see, he's not a very good leader. He's not a very good king, essentially. What happens is, after Napoleon's defeat, the King of Spain, who has been restored to the throne, is being pressured to make slavery illegal. And Iturbide is not only a general, but he's also a farmer. He's a plantation owner. And the outlawing of slavery would basically make his lifestyle impossible. So he and a bunch of other conservatives get together and side with the revolutionaries for the first time and successfully lead a revolution in Mexico. Now, he forms a monarchy and becomes the king of Mexico, but he only lasts for about a year before he's assassinated and a new government put in place. However, the Mexican government from that point on is going to really struggle. The idea is to try to form a republic, but it's really hard to keep things together. There's a lot of corrupt bureaucrats who get put in positions of power, and things just are going to be a struggle for basically the next 150 years. Now, on to Brazil. Dom Pedro. Dom Pedro was the son of the King of Portugal. Now, going back to the story. When Napoleon and his armies were marching on Spain, the King of Portugal was very nervous, thinking, hey, we're next, being next door neighbors. So he and the entire court fled to the largest colony that Portugal had, which was Brazil, and sets up a new capital sort of away from the capital in Rio de Janeiro. So for a few years, Rio becomes the more or less de facto capital of Portugal. And so that means a lot of money is being spent building up Rio. Now, before it was just a colony. Now it's going to be a capital. So they need buildings, they need comforts. They're going to make it a modern city. But once Napoleon's defeated, the King of Portugal goes back home. Brazil isn't really cool with becoming just another colony after that point. Rio especially doesn't want to play second fiddle to Lisbon. So they entreat the King of Portugal to set them free as a colony, as no longer being a colony, as being a new country. It's asked, hey, can we be a new country? The King of Portugal says no. So they then go to his son and say, hey, could you talk some sense into your dad for us? And so Dom Pedro goes to King of Portugal and says, look, here's our options. One, we say no, and the Brazilians revolt. A revolution is fought, and they win. Now we've spent a huge fortune on trying to keep a colony. We've lost that, plus we've lost the value of the colony. That's no good. Option two, they revolt and we win. We still spend a lot of money, a boatload of money, and in addition, we now have to try to pacify a hostile environment. There's the possibility they won't rebel. Don't say naughty words. And what happens is that, everything's just fine, but that's unlikely to happen. So the King of Portugal is convinced and says, okay, you can become a free country, but Dom Pedro has to be king. And so Brazil's like, cool, we'll do that. And so Brazil becomes a free country without any bloodshed. So we have a few different examples of revolutions occurring throughout South America, most of which end in bloodshed of some fashion. This one is bloodless. That's pretty cool. Cool storybook. That's Iturbide. Again, kind of the typical officer of the era. Not a very good game. All right. Oh, my goodness. And that's it. That's it for this section. Any questions? Or rather, is there anything that doesn't quite make sense? You good? Solid? Fantastic. So basically, what do you need to know from this section? Know the people, know what they did. So if I say, who was known as the Liberator, you would tell me? Simón Bolivar, yes. Or Bolivar would be sufficient. If I asked why or what city became the capital of Portugal because of Napoleon, Rio. If I were to ask you what was El Grito de Dolores, you would tell me?
The Queen of Pilar.
It's a speech given by Father Hidalgo to raise a revolution. Solid? Fantastic. Let's talk quiz. I'm not going to be here Friday because of the funeral. So the plan is next Tuesday. Next Tuesday I have a quiz. Okay? Also, you know how I used to have you guys do words and you guys would get points on for stuff? I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going back to the primary source documents. I trust you now that you can do that on your own. So, you'll be alright. It'd be fine. It'd be good. It'd be awesome. By the way, so you might be wondering, hey, what are we doing this week? I'll tell you. So I'll give you new material yesterday and today. I wasn't here for any new material. Tomorrow we're going to focus a little bit more on the Crimean War. Because we're doing that. And then come Thursday and Friday, you guys are going to be watching Les Miserables. which we're watching the non-musical version. So if anyone's like, oh, musicals, don't worry about it. You guys don't even know what that is. It's cool. Les Miserables. It's French. Okay. This is not the new one. That's the musical version. This is the older one with Geoffrey Rush and Claire Danes and Liam Neeson and Uma Thurman. It's like from the mid-90s. It's very, very good still. I think you'll enjoy it. However, that being said, it is it's pretty intense at times. It's good though. Let's do it. Good story. It was actually written by Victor Hugo. He was the same guy who wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He was what's called a realistic author. He wrote in a style that didn't try to hide the bad. It was trying to portray people and things realistically, which certainly has its positives, but it also means that it can be a little bit much at times. Okay, let's go to the next set of notes, why don't we? That picture. Where is my mouse? There it is. Whee! Rev 2. All right, this is a super short section. We're going to start by talking about politics. You guys have seen this graph before, but I'm going to show you again for reasons. This shows the differing political ideologies, the liberal versus conservative, otherwise the left and the right. Now how this works. During the times of the French Revolution, mostly it was a radical period of time. You see that fits into the far left. That's incredibly liberal, changing everything. However, once the revolution is over, once Napoleon's wars of conquest are over, we've got to decide what we're going to do about government. Now, those who were in power before the revolution would kind of like to stay over here, conservative. This would be like, we're going to go back to a monarchy where the nobles are really powerful and rich. The middle class, those who gained most of the power during the revolution, are like, how about no? Let's come over here. You know, we don't necessarily want to go all the way over here, like, you know, where Marat's like, you know, let's kill everybody who is not, 100%, like us, radical, crazy. Not like radical, it's like, really, and then there are those who are on the other side, like, we need to go back to absolute monarchies, presidents are reactionary. So they're extremists on the outskirts. Most people are kind of sitting closer to the center, but you do have those on the outskirts as well. This is going to be a big question in a lot of different countries. How are we going to deal with the problems that Napoleon left behind? And so, we're going to have this sort of debate. And leads to a lot of wars. Another major issue is nationalism. Now, nationalism is something I know we've talked about, but I'm not entirely certain if you guys remember what it is all about. So, what do you guys know about nationalism? Nothing. Totally blank slate. Fantastic. Nationalism is desiring for one group of people to have a country that's the best in the world, essentially, is a way of looking at it. You might say that it's like super patriotism. You might say that nationalism is my country number one, everybody else number whatever, number two. Yes. Great example of nationalism is the Olympics. Seeing people, USA, everyone's kind of like nationalists. They're all about their country winning the gold and coming back and defeating all the other nations and making them cry, all that sort of thing. That's like kind of weak sauce nationalism. That's kind of been fun nationalism. The not so fun nationalism is like Adolf Hitler. Nationalism. Like that escalated quickly. And again, it's a spectrum of things, I suppose. But nationalism in and of itself is a divisive, dangerous ideology. Patriotism is not dangerous. Patriotism is, I like my country. That doesn't mean you necessarily agree with your country, or you think the country's doing good stuff. You can totally disagree with your country and still be a patriot. Consider it this way. When you love something or someone, you don't just throw them away the second you disagree with them. If your house has a leak in the roof, you don't burn it down. Leak! You fix it. If a relationship isn't working and you love someone, you fix it. At least you try to. Some things cannot be fixed, I suppose. But you put in the effort. You don't just throw it away. You know what I mean? This is patriotism. You might not agree with what the country is doing, but you try to fix it. You don't just throw it out the window. Nationalism, on the other hand, is not about fixing things that way. It's we are going to be this way, and everything else is dangerous. You are this or not. Our country needs to be dominant. Our country is best. Other countries can just all die if they need to, as long as we're still around. Here's the question, though. Nation is not a concept that equals country. Like the nation nationalism isn't talking about like the USA. We're talking about a racial background. For instance, Hitler, he was all about Germans. That's a race, it's an ethnicity. We tend to say, like, well, no. German is a country. It's Germany, No, there's Germans in Austria, Czechoslovakia, all over Europe. His idea was you're going to unify all Germans and everyone else can just go die. That's nationalism. What if you have a country that's made up of a bunch of different races, like the United States? If we go with nationalism, that's like, well, we're just going to divide it up by racial lines, and you guys get this part of the U.S. and you guys get this part. We're just going to break it all up, and now we're going to form our own countries. It would utterly ruin the country. It could not happen. This is what happens in the Ottoman Empire. 3 different examples of nationalism affecting and changing the old order. 1, Greece. Greece breaks free from the Ottoman Empire and forms a country of Greece. 2, Poland. Poland tries to break free from Russia but fails. 3, Italy. Italy achieves Italian unity, kind of. See, Italy was broken up a bunch of other different nations, part of France, part of Spain. And so we're going to try to form this Italian country. The thing is, Italy was never really that unified to begin with. Even today, Italians don't really look at themselves as Italian. They see themselves as part of their city-states. My wife's cousin had over Christmas, brought a visitor from Italy. She was an exchange student. And she told everyone she was Italian because she didn't think anybody in America would know where she was from. I asked her, by the way. She was from, not Florence, hang on. It was from Milan. It's like, so Americans are going to know Milan, because that's kind of a big place. Like, I was thinking maybe she's going to say something like, a little bit more obscure. It's like, no, Milan's pretty famous. And that's just kind of how they view themselves. She was Milanese. Anyhow, but the whole idea is unification on the idea of country. The problem, though, is that this pushes countries to war. For one country to become dominant, the others have to be subservient. Add on to this, though, that because of Napoleon, there's a lot of paranoia. This idea we need to maintain a balance between the countries, because if one country gets too far ahead of the others, we'll have a repeat, where they conquer all of Europe again. We don't want that. And so you have a lot of alliances being formed and shifted based upon who's number one at the time. For instance, the Crimean War is going to be fought over a territory around Crimea, which is a peninsula, specifically the area of Sevastopol. Does this sound familiar at all to you guys, by the way? Anyone been following what's happening in Ukraine, how Russia just kind of took, Sevastopol and took the Crimea? It was like, yoink. Because they basically just stole a country, which is what they did. Part of the country. They cut it in half and said, you can have this part, we want this. It totally happened. And it's a repeat of what happened, over 100 years ago. So it's just kind of interesting how that is. Anywho. But, again, these are some major problems. The Crimean War is going to be fought over territory controlled by the Ottomans, and the Russians are invading, and so the British and the French and the Prussians help out the Ottomans against the Russians. Even though with the Greek War for Independence, they had fought against the Ottomans to help Greece break free. So it's kind of a weird situation as political alliances shift as they're trying to set up the most advantageous situation. So, in France, we have two revolutions that occur after Napoleon. The first is 1830, the second 1848. The first one ends up with Charles X being replaced by Louis Philippe. Charles X is replaced because he attempts to set up an absolute monarchy. He has a monarchy fail. So Louis Philippe is put in a position of power. Louis Philippe, by the way, was a king who had grown up amongst the middle class. His friends were all middle class. He dressed middle class. He talked middle class. He acted middle class. And so when he became king, the middle class were having a field day. He protected their rights like nobody's business, which was very bad for the majority of workers, because this is into the Industrial Revolution. So life was not so great for a lot of people, unless you were middle class at the time. But he was nicknamed the Citizen King because he didn't act like a king. He acted like a business person. He acted like, he acted important. He wasn't important. He acted like a king to some extent, but he wasn't like a monarch they'd been experienced to. However, in 1848, a new revolution goes on to establish a republic. The reason is there's a very, very bad run of crops. The economy starts to waver, and bread becomes expensive. Again, food is what causes people to rebel. So, they establish a republic under Louis Napoleon, who is, by the way, the grandson of that Napoleon. So guess what he does? He becomes a dictator, forms his own country, and basically does the same thing Napoleon did. Becomes a new emperor. He names himself Napoleon III, saying that it was a line of unbroken succession, that his father should have been Napoleon II. And so we have a new monarchy. However, while Louis Napoleon was a very, very good politician, he was not a very, very good military general. He was not his grandfather. And so we're going to see Prussia basically embarrasses the ever-living bejesus out of France during this era, during the Franco-Prussian War. They end up instigating a war that lasts 4 weeks. That's pretty embarrassing. Think about it this way.
Compare the technological advances of the United States of America to the Taliban. We've been at war in Afghanistan and all that for how long? Ostensibly it's over, but we're still having a military presence for 14 years. And how long were they in France with Russia? 4 weeks. That's kind of intense when you get right down to it.
So, the Crimean War. Crimea River. We'll talk more about that Thursday. However, there's going to be some changes in Russia due to the Crimean War, specifically the abolition of serfdom. However, Russia does not change very quickly. Russia is going to undergo a painful process of trying to modernize that is going to result in a lot of bloodshed as the Russian people are basically tormented by poor leaders. There's no other real way of saying it. What happens is Tsar Alexander II, who tries to change things, ends up being assassinated. The reason he's assassinated is because he wants to change and modernize. But the nobles, the boyars, the folks who are in positions of power, don't want to change because they're rich and powerful. If he's talking about change, they're going to lose their power and prestige. They don't want that, so they kill him. His son, who I believe is Alexander III, when he takes over, is absolutely livid, paranoid about the assassination of his father. So he begins using secret police to try to root out any disloyalty amongst his citizens. If they suspected you of being a spy or being disloyal, you just would simply disappear. Your family would never hear from you again. People were put into camps to work. And in particular, he was very, very hateful towards the Jews. Rumor has it that the assassin was Jewish. And so while he doesn't order them, he doesn't also frown upon the pogroms. The pogroms were basically anti-Jewish lynch mobs that roamed around Russia killing and burning Jewish people and businesses. Does this sound at all familiar to you? Question. Let's go back into the past. You see, first understand that when we talk about Jews, we're not just talking about a religious group, we're talking about a race. People throughout history are pretty darn racist. Even today, people are pretty racist. They just don't like to say it. We talk about that in sociology. So, understanding that, we can launch into why people have the attitudes and prejudices they do. Well, let's talk Jews versus Christians in medieval Europe. In medieval Europe, business was really kind of a misunderstood concept, like how business worked and everything like that. And in particular, the usage of money was seen as kind of a dirty trade. If you look at the way that the Bible refers to money, let me read it this way. Does it ever talk about rich people in a good way? Not to my knowledge. Maybe once. But the vast majority of the time, when it talks about rich people, it is scathing. There's that famous biblical passage of it is easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich person to make it into heaven. So basically, if you're rich, you're evil. Why? Again, they don't understand money, how it works per se. So they figure if someone is rich, they must have gotten away because they cheat people. Yes? By the way, there are people who think this way today. If you're rich, you must be corrupt. It's a misunderstanding of money. Because money can actually make both people rich. That's kind of the whole idea of an economy, to be honest. Everyone gains.
But anyways, people misunderstand all the time. So, let's look at the Jews. The Jews, on the other hand, view it the opposite way. And if you have money, it's because God is blessing you. So you don't even have to wait for heaven. Like, God is like, man, you're so good, you're getting blessed now. So Christians are kind of discouraged from being in businesses that make a lot of money, where Jews are encouraged, no, go make a lot of money. That's what you should do. Furthermore, in medieval Europe, the laws were set by the church. And there was a sin of loaning money to somebody and charging money for that loan. It's called usury. We call that a loan. The Jews had no such religious restrictions because they weren't Christian. They could practice their own religious laws as long as they paid the tax and Christian rules. So they formed the first banks. So basically, the Jews were seen as untrustworthy, as grabbing at money, and as basically being second-class citizens, as subhuman. Again, because racism. Fast forward this over thousands of years, and it doesn't go away. We don't really see it because, again, we live in kind of an unparalleled time of races getting along. We still have racism, as I've said. We're still all pretty racist, but it's not an overt and damaging and horrible sort of way. It tends to be hidden. Someone getting back up to sociology. And so the whole idea of believing wholeheartedly that another person of the race is evil and should be destroyed is kind of hard for us to grasp. But all you have to do is go back 2 generations and you'll see people like that. My grandfather always referred to the Japanese as those damn Japs, because he was in World War II. I heard some pretty horrible things about people from Middle Eastern descent after 9/11. It's us versus them, which, by the way, is what again? We just talked about this. What is that attitude? Nationalism? Yeah, it's kind of a thing. Because you have to in a situation of life or death. In a war, you have to understand, killing someone's terrible. So many soldiers come back from battle suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and all kinds of other mental illnesses because of the stress of combat and of taking a human life. The only way to really wrap your head around that, to make it okay to kill someone, it's not really a human. They're another race. It's fine. Kill as many as you want. They're not really human. It doesn't matter. You make them an enemy. You make them a monster. You use propaganda to show them doing horrible things, to make you angry and hate them and despise them. The world would be better if they were just all dead. But then what happens when the war's over and everyone's at peace? Does make those feelings magically go away? No. It perpetuates an ideology of hatred. Now add this for groups of people that have been at war for centuries, literally thousands of years, and you can see why they can't just get along. You know what I mean? Then there's also the monkey and the ladder analogy. You guys heard the monkey and the ladder experiment? All right, so some scientists did this a long time ago. I'm not really sure when. I say a long time ago, I think it was the 1960s. Anyways, so basically they did a social experiment where they had a ladder with a shower type thing with spray water in this cage, and on top of the ladder was a bunch of bananas. And they put monkeys in the cage. Monkeys see the bananas, what do they do? Climb the ladder to go get the bananas. However, there was a sensor that would cause all the monkeys to get sprayed with water, which made the monkeys get up to the second step. They try to climb the ladder, spray all the monkeys, and they jump down. So eventually the monkeys figured out if anyone climbs that ladder, we get sprayed with water. So if a monkey tried to climb it, they'd just beat the hell out of it. So eventually no monkeys would climb the ladder. So then they took a third of those monkeys, shipped them out, brought in a third new monkeys. So what do the new monkeys do? Sweet, 3 bananas, start climbing the ladder. They get the hell beaten out of them, so eventually they don't do it anymore. So they got rid of a third other monkeys for the third new monkeys. So this is now 2/3 new monkeys, 1/3 the old monkeys. So again, what happens? By the time you get the monkeys, you get the hell beaten out of them. They did this until they replaced every single monkey with new monkeys. And they would all, anytime one of them tried to climb it, they'd beat them up so they wouldn't get wet. So they learned, we don't go up the ladder. They never knew why. Same sort of thing. you're taught generational hatred from a very young age. We hate them. Why do we hate them? We just do. And that's a big problem. How do we have world peace when that's going on? I don't know. These are questions. The nice thing is it's possible. Anything is possible. All this stuff we can change. Just how to do it. I don't know. Figure it out. And that is
Too edgy for me.
right. So that's going on YouTube.